On behalf of the Riverside Church, I welcome each of you to this wonderful gathering for peace. Mr. Secretary General, on behalf of the Riverside Church, Annyeong haseyo. You are most welcome here. We welcome you as our honored guest. We welcome you in your esteemed capacity as General Secretary of the United Nations, but most of all, we welcome you as an ambassador of peace. You have said that your goal, and I quote, is to make the whole world a nuclear weapon-free zone. And it is in that spirit that we also welcome you as a kindred spirit and brother. I am informed that when you were 8 or 9 years old, you were selected by your class to send a message to then UN General Secretary Dag Hammarskjöld. But we're unsure as to whether the message was ever sent. Please enlighten us. I am also told that as a child you regularly walked nearly 10 kilometers to a fertilizer plant to learn English from the factory's American advisors. But English is not the only language you learned, in that you are fluent in 5 languages. I am also informed that when you were 18 years old, you won an essay contest sponsored by the Red Cross, earning a trip to the United States, where you met then President John F. Kennedy. At that meeting, a journalist asked you what you wanted to be when you grew up, and you answered, a diplomat. We are most grateful that your dreams and aspirations came true. The task of ridding the world of nuclear weapons is a monumental task, which everyone here supports. For we realize that in doing so, you free the world to pursue more civilized endeavors of systemic change that provides quality education for all, skills for growing and harvesting food for all, building homes and reconciling divisions between people and nations. The voices of the world's great souls and advocates of peace, both living and dead, blend with our own voices in welcoming you, Mr. Ban Ki-moon, to Riverside Church and to this International Conference of Peace.
Thank you very much, dear Reverend Arnold Thomas. Now, I should like to call Dr. Joseph Garson of American Friends Service Committee. He is assuming the top responsibility in organizing this conference as well. He is going to introduce the Secretary General, Ban Ki-moon.
It is my deep honor and privilege to introduce the United Nations General Secretary to this conference, and to those who have joined us around the world via the World Wide Web. The Secretary General's acceptance of our invitation is a signal that even as a growing number of governments are working to fulfill the promise of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, that we cannot leave the abolition of nuclear weapons, the survival of the human species, to those who speak in our name. Popular movements and people's power are the motive force that lead governments to negotiate and to fulfill their moral responsibilities. Just as we forced governments to negotiate test ban treaties, to freeze the Cold War arms race, and to end wars from Vietnam to Iraq, we must again educate, organize, and act to ensure that we, our children, our grandchildren, and future generations can enjoy the extraordinary and precious gift of life. The nuclear danger is anything but abstract. Hiroshima was destroyed in 9 seconds. By today's standards, that was a small bomb. Since the Nagasaki atomic bombing, during wars and international crises, United States presidents have prepared and threatened to initiate nuclear war at least 40 times. Every other nuclear weapons state, including Israel, India, and Pakistan, have made similar threats. And hidden in plain sight are the victims of nuclear weapons and its production cycle, the hibakusha, uranium miners and their families, those dying and suffering from nuclear accidents and nuclear waste, and from fallout from nuclear tests. And the planet itself is being poisoned. International pressure and the dangers of nuclear weapons proliferation have led men like Henry Kissinger, who once prepared to initiate nuclear war, and the presidents of the 2 greatest nuclear powers to recommit their nations to fulfilling Article 6 of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, even if their actions have yet to match their rhetoric. But we still have a long ways to go, which leads me to Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, who is using his exceptional influence to shape and reinforce state and popular pressures to secure our futures through complete nuclear weapons abolition. Secretary General Ban was the Republic of Korea's Minister of Foreign Affairs and Trade. He served the ministry in New Delhi, in Washington, D.C., and Vienna, and as Foreign Policy Advisor to the President of Korea, and as Chief National Security Advisor to the President, and also as Deputy Minister for Policy Planning, and he also served as the Director General of American Affairs. He has a long and distinguished career. Last year, he issued his 5-point plan to rid the world of nuclear weapons. Among other things, it called for the nuclear powers to finally fulfill their 4-decade-old promise by beginning the good faith negotiations for nuclear weapons abolition required by the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. He urged universal membership in the multilateral treaties, which would include Israel, India, and Pakistan. He stressed the importance of creation of nuclear weapons-free zones and the negotiation of a fissile material cutoff treaty. He pointed to the necessity of eliminating other weapons of mass destruction and the stanching of the weaponization of space if we are to truly achieve a nuclear weapons-free world. More recently, the Secretary General has worked to ensure the success of this month's review conference. He has reiterated the need for the creation of a Middle East nuclear weapons-free zone and the imperative of the nuclear powers finally fulfilling their commitment to the treaty's grand bargain by beginning those good faith negotiations. Friends, without further ado, let me introduce Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, who has most generously accepted our invitation.
What a great honor it is for me to be with you this evening. I know of your hard work and dedication. I know how much you have sacrificed in standing for your principles and benefits. I know how much courage it takes to speak out, to protest, and to carry the banner of this most noble human aspiration, world peace. And so most of all, I'm here tonight to thank you for your such a strong commitment and your courage and your leadership. Let me begin by saying how humbling it is for me to speak to you in this very famous place, Riverside Church. I know that it was here that Martin Luther King Jr. spoke against the war in Vietnam. I know that Nelson Mandela spoke here on his first visit to the United States after he was freed from the prison. Standing with you, looking out, I can see what they saw. A sea of committed women and men who come from all corners of the world to move this world. It reminds us that of what matters most in life is not so much the message from the bully pulpit, but rather the movement from the pews, from people like you. And so I say, keep it up. Our shared vision is within reach. That is a world free of nuclear weapons. On the eve of the nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty Review Conference, beginning on Monday, we know the world is watching. Let it heed our call. Disarm now. Ladies and gentlemen, from my first day in office as a Secretary General of the United Nations, I made clear that nuclear disarmament is my top priority. Perhaps in part, this deep personal commitment comes from my own experience as a small boy in Korea, growing up immediately after the Korean War. My school was rubble, there was no walls, and I studied on the dirt. We studied in the open air. The United Nations rebuilt my country, and I was lucky enough to receive a good education. But more than that, I learned about peace, solidarity, and above all, the power of community action. These values are not abstract principles to me. I owe my life to them. I try to embody them in all my work. Just a few weeks ago, I traveled to Ground Zero, the former site at Semipalatinsk in Kazakhstan. That was the notorious nuclear test site during the time of Soviet Union. They detonated more than 450 nuclear weapons in Semipalatinsk. It was strangely beautiful. The great green steppe reached us as far as the eye could see. But of course, the eyes does not immediately see the scope of the devastation. Vast areas where people still cannot live, cannot go. Poisoned lakes and rivers, high rates of cancer, and birth defects. After independence in 1991, President Nazarbayev of Kazakhstan, he closed the site and banished whole nuclear weapons from its territory. Today, Semipalatinsk is a powerful symbol of hope. It is a new ground zero for disarmament. the birthplace of the Central Asian nuclear weapons free zone. In August, I will travel to another ground zero, Mayor Akiba's proud city of Hiroshima. And there, I will repeat our call for a nuclear-free world. The people of Hiroshima and people of Nagasaki, and especially the Hibakusha, know too well the horror of nuclear war. It must never be repeated. Yet 65 years later, the world still lives under nuclear shadow. How long? How long must we wait to rid ourselves from these nuclear weapons? How long will we keep passing these problems to our succeeding generations? We here tonight know that it is time to end this senseless cycle. We know that nuclear disarmament is not a distant, unattainable goal. It is a dream which we can achieve. It is an urgent necessity. Here and now, we are determined to achieve it. In fact, we have come very close in the past. 24 years ago, in Reykjavik, Iceland, President Ronald Reagan and General Secretary Mikhail Gorbachev came within a hair's breadth of agreeing to eliminate all nuclear weapons. It was a dramatic reminder of how far we can go as long as we have a vision and the will, the political will. Today's generation of nuclear negotiators must take a lesson from Reykjavik. Be bold, think big, for it yields big results. And that is why, again, we need people like you, people who understand that the world is overarmed and that peace is underfunded. People who understand people like you who understand that the time for change is now. Ladies and gentlemen, the NPT entered into force 40 years ago. Ever since, it has been the foundation of the non-proliferation regime and our effort for nuclear disarmament. To quote you, Mr. Gerson, it is one of the seminal agreements of the 20th century. Let's not forget, in 1963, some experts predicted that there could be as many as 25 nuclear weapon states by this time, by the end of the last century. It did not happen, in large part because the NPT guided the world toward the right direction. Today, we have a reason for renewed optimism. Global public opinion is swinging our way. Governments are looking at the issue with fresh eyes. Consider just the most recent, very positive development of situations. Leading by example, the United States announced a review of its nuclear posture, forswearing the use of nuclear weapons against non-nuclear states so long as they are in compliance with the NPT. In Prague, President Obama and President Medvedev, they have signed a successor regime to START treaty, accompanied by serious cuts in nuclear arsenal. In Washington, just 2 weeks ago, the leaders of 47 nations united in their efforts to keep nuclear weapons and materials out of the hands of terrorists. I myself was there, as representative of the United Nations. And on Monday, coming Monday, we hope to open a new chapter in the life of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. In 2005, when leaders gathered for the last review of the NPT, the outcome did not match the expectations. In plain English, it failed utterly. We cannot afford to fail again. Failure is not an option. After all, there are still more than 25,000 nuclear weapons in the world's arsenals. Nuclear terrorism remains a real and present danger. There has been no progress in establishing nuclear weapons-free zone in the Middle East. The nuclear program of Iran and North Korea are of a serious concern to global efforts to curb nuclear proliferation. To deal with these and other issues, I have set out my own 5 action plans, and I thank you for your encouraging response. I especially welcome your support for the idea of concluding a nuclear weapon convention. Article 6 of the NPT requires the parties to pursue negotiations on a treaty on general and complete disarmament under international control. These negotiations are long overdue. Next week, I will call on all countries, and most particularly the nuclear weapon states, to fulfill this obligation. Ladies and gentlemen, we should not have unrealistic expectations for the conference, but neither can we afford to lower our sights. What I see on the horizon is a world free of nuclear weapons. What I see before me are the people who will help make it happen, like yourselves. Please keep up your good work. Sound the alarm. Keep up the pressure. Ask your leaders what they are doing personally to eliminate the nuclear menace. Above all, continue to be the voice of conscience. We will rid the world of nuclear weapons. And when we do, it will be because of people like you. The world owes you its gratitude. Thank you very much for your commitment and leadership. Thank you.
Okay, I need to ask everyone to remain seated while the Secretary General returns to the rest of his busy schedule. So if you'll give us a moment, we will escort the Secretary General.
And now, it's my pleasure to introduce Madame Marie Socorro Gomes, who is the President of the World Peace Council, President of the Brazilian Peace Council, SEBRAPAT, and she is a former Member of Parliament.
Obrigada, companheira Jaqueline Lecoq.
I'd like to start off with a poem by Vinicius de Moraes and Gerson Conrad, The Rose of Hiroshima. Think about the children, mute and telepathic. Think about the girls, blind and inexact. Think about the women, changed routes. Think about the wounds, like balmy roses. But oh, don't forget the rose of Hiroshima. The hereditary rose, the radioactive rose, stupid and invalid. The atomic anti-rose, without color or perfume, without rose or anything. Ladies and gentlemen, comrades, the mobilization of hundreds of social organizations of the peace movement and international solidarity all over the world in face of the nuclear weapons issue is of the greatest importance. The World Peace Council takes part in the Disarm Now initiative with the conviction that the debates held here may contribute, with so many others, to strengthen the movement for peace, disarmament, and the elimination of all nuclear weapons of mass destruction from the face of the earth. It is with that, the same spirit, that the World Peace Council, as a member of UN's Economic and Social Council, will attend all talks in the review conference of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, and will submit its deliberations to be debated by pacifist movements, social movements, non-governmental organizations, personalities, and political, cultural, and academic institutions. Forming a collective awareness on the threats that loom over the rights of the people, the sovereignty of nations and world peace is indispensable and cannot be postponed. We are an organization that has been fighting for 60 years for peace and for the abolition of nuclear weapons. We have joined all who fight for a new international order, for a peaceful solution of disputes and conflicts. As one of the legitimate expressions of civil society, we consider our main duty to strengthen international cooperation, which is based on equal rights, people's self-determination, sovereign equality of national states, and the goodwill in fulfilling international obligations, which should constitute the grounds for all governments and multilateral organizations. Those principles, consecrated by international right, form the backbone of the United Nations and are aimed at maintaining peace and international security. They are, however, flagrantly disrespected by imperialist powers which use their mighty clout to promote nuclear blackmail, perpetrate wars, military interventions to threaten weaker countries, and impose resolutions and treaties that are not based on the consecrated criteria of balance and equality. We understand that this fight must be essentially anti-imperialist, for it derives from the conception according to which the system oppressing sovereign people and nations is the main cause of wars and the main stimulant to militarization and arms race.
O Tratado de Não Proliferação Nuclear é destes acordos internacionais marcados pelo desequilíbrio, desigualdade e assimetria. Como movimento pacifista, sempre saudamos com entusiasmo as iniciativas visando ao desarmamento, a redução das armas nucleares e a não proliferação. Nossa posição de princípios é pela eliminação de todas as armas nucleares e de destruição em massa. Há 60 anos, o Conselho Mundial da Paz lançava o apelo de Estocolmo, que guarda impressionante atualidade. O documento, que se tornou célebre porque percorreu o mundo e recolheu a assinatura de 600 milhões de pessoas, dizia com simplicidade e clareza: Vamos a todas as pessoas de boa vontade no mundo a assinarem este apelo.
The Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty is one of those international agreements characterized by unbalance, inequality, and asymmetry. As a pacifist movement, we have always saluted with enthusiasm the initiatives aimed at disarmament, the reduction of nuclear weapons, and non-proliferation. We have made a principled stand for the elimination of all nuclear weapons. 60 years ago, the World Peace Council issued the Stockholm Appeal, which is still impressively up to date. That document, which famously traveled the world collecting the signatures of 600 million people, stated clearly and simply, we demand an absolute ban on nuclear weapons which are aimed at aggression and the mass extermination of people. We demand the establishment of a rigorous international control to ensure the application of such ban. We believe that the first government to make use of the nuclear weapon, no matter against which country, would commit a crime against humankind and should be treated as a war criminal. We call all people of goodwill in the world to sign this appeal. The Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, effective since 1970, was ratified by 188 countries, one of which the Democratic People's Republic of Korea withdrew later. Only 3 countries, Israel, India, and Pakistan, have not ratified the treaty. This treaty, to a certain extent, could have constituted a step towards peace, but there were some flagrant contradictions in its very conception and in the political conditions to which its application is submitted. Criticisms regarding the NPT in a moment when the United Nations are once again reviewing the treaty are related to its asymmetric character. Theoretically, the NPT would be based on 3 principles: non-proliferation, disarmament, and the peaceful use of nuclear energy. However, as long as the practical effects are concerned, that is essentially a non-proliferation treaty to which disarmament and the peaceful use of nuclear energy are merely accessory aspects. Countries that do not have nuclear weapons accept not to import, build, or acquire nuclear weapons, and those that possess weapons accept the duty of not transforming nuclear weapons to those that do not have them. And here lies the main negative aspect of the NPT. The monopoly of nuclear weapons is frozen, and the issues of disarmament and the peaceful use of nuclear energy are merely addressed in formal terms. Article 6 of the NPT states that all signatory states are obliged to carry out negotiations on efficient measures regarding the cessation of the nuclear race and nuclear disarmament. Likewise, they commit to conclude a treaty on generalized disarmament under a strict and efficient international control. At this point, the generality, rhetoric, and contradiction become clear. The world needs disarmament and the elimination of all nuclear weapons. Not only non-proliferation, not only vague appeals to the good faith of those that possess such weapons, so that agreements are made according strictly to their conveniences and needs on reducing arsenals. The review conference of the NPT in 2000 offered the hope of disarmament by adopting 13 steps that stated verifiably and irreversible measures for disarmament and the reduction of the role of nuclear weapons in the defense strategies of great powers. Those 13 steps also included the implementation of the Nuclear Test Ban Treaty. Unfortunately, however, those efforts made by the countries of the Coalition for a New Agenda, among which non-aligned countries, were frustrated. The abandonment of commitments made in the NPT Review Conference in 2000, the exclusive emphasis of non-proliferation, the prioritization of nuclear weapons and defense strategies, the inefficiency and lack of transparency in agreements to reduce strategic weapons, and the United States' insistence in creating defense shields, as well as its refusal to the commitment of not being the first to use nuclear weapons, reveal that great powers holding nuclear weapons, especially the US, are not willing to take significant steps towards disarmament. Since 2001, nuclear blackmails have increased in the US by announcing its new doctrine of national security based on preventative war, reaffirmed its rights to resort to all kinds of weapons, including nuclear ones. Our main preoccupations concentrate in that aspect. The NPT has not resulted in significant or concrete steps towards disarmament and the abolition of nuclear weapons. The emphasis on non-proliferation has led to another serious distortion in terms of pressures to force countries to adhere to the additional protocol and renounce to the irrevocable right to develop nuclear technology with peaceful ends, a right that is formally acknowledged in the NPT. This right, on which grounds non-nuclear nations, mainly underdeveloped and developing countries, agreed to ratify, is being flagrantly violated, as we can see by the attempt to sanction and threaten countries that are trying to develop nuclear weapons with peaceful ends. Ladies and gentlemen, comrades, as we approach another review conference of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, the pacifist movements express their fair concern with the maintenance of great arsenals of nuclear weapons. The presidents of the United States and Russia have just announced a bilateral agreement to reduce strategic weapons, which is considered the most significant in the last 20 years, agreeing to reduce arsenals to 1,550 strategic warheads in 7 years. The agreement has nothing but a symbolic meaning, as it is connected to the bilateral relations between those countries in the geopolitical field. It has no meaning in terms of reducing the danger of destroying the world. But as a demonstration that the announced reduction of warheads has nothing to do with the efforts for peace, the development of the Prompt Global Strike project was announced a few days ago. That is a new weapon to be assembled in long-distance missiles that are able to fly in a speed several times faster than sound. Therefore, as they are launched in the United States, they are able to hit any place on the earth in less than an hour. The justification is to maintain the so-called dissuasive power, even as the nuclear arsenal is reduced. The world's largest nuclear power has announced its new defense strategy and held an international conference in Washington a few weeks ago on nuclear security with the proclaimed objective of fighting nuclear terrorism and preventing terrorist networks from acquiring the capacity of producing and handling atomic bombs. Amid the rhetoric on disarmament, the United States proclaimed once again that it has the right to use nuclear weapons in circumstances viewed as extreme in order to defend the vital interests of America and its allies. And once more, the superpower refused to declare that it would not be the first to use nuclear weapons. Under such circumstances, to what use are speeches that favor non-proliferation? Before such treaties, how the government of countries that do not possess nuclear weapons should behave? Should they succumb to blackmail and pressure or affirm their sovereignty and their rights, demanding international treaties where the key is equality and commitments are valid for all? As a movement of pacifism and solidarity to countries and peoples attacked or under the threat of aggression, we could not silence before the evidence that as a new defense policy is launched and as a nuclear safety conference is held, two countries, Iran and Korea, were placed under international suspicion and threatened with war in case they did not submit to imperial designs. 6.5 decades ago, when it entered the international stage as a superpower, willing to dominate the world and organize it according to its own interests, the US perpetrated a nuclear attack against the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, causing the death of more than 200,000 people and incalculable destruction. That was an unnameable crime against humankind for which that country has not been punished. Today, that same empire makes threats of using again its nuclear weapons against countries viewed as violators of international laws that do not accept its impositions, with an infinitely greater arsenal which price peoples and nations would pay in case those threats are carried out. Such distress is justified since, as we have highlighted, the United States, while launching its new defense policy a few weeks ago, has refused to commit to not being the first country to make use of nuclear weapons. Today, humankind listens to slogans on peace and disarmament, but until now, the announcements of a world free from wars and without nuclear weapons are nothing but rhetoric or the manifestation of a vague ideal. In practice, blackmail and threats still prevail, demanding attention and combativeness from our part. Ladies and gentlemen, comrades, the severity with which we face historical experience and the dangers and threats looming over peoples are not disconnected to our convictions that peace and disarmament are possible. Those convictions date to the origins of the World Peace Council and to its founding document issued 60 years ago, the Stockholm Appeal, which besides demanding the abolition of nuclear weapons, condemns countries that make use of those weapons as perpetrators of crimes against humankind. The cause of peace, disarmament, and the abolition of nuclear weapons is first and foremost an issue for peoples and nations that fight to consolidate their sovereignty and development, a struggle that demands collective awareness, unity, and broad social mobilization. It is a struggle for all humankind. Thank you very much. Socorro Gomes. Disarm now. Obrigada.
Earlier this evening, it was a real honor, a lifetime honor, to greet the Secretary General as one of the conference organizers. I also have another lifetime honor, and that is actually working for another amazing man, Mayor Tadatoshi Akiba of Hiroshima. I serve as an executive advisor to the Hiroshima Peace Culture Foundation and North American coordinator of Mayors for Peace. Some of you may not know that Mayor Akiba lived for many years in the United States. As a foreign exchange student, he graduated from Elmwood Park High School in Illinois. He did his graduate studies at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, earning his PhD in mathematics in 1970. He subsequently taught mathematics at the State University of New York at Stony Brook and Tufts University in Massachusetts, returning to Japan in 1986. He was elected to the Japanese House of Representatives in 1990 and served until 1999. He assumed office as mayor of Hiroshima in February 1999 and was re-elected in 2003 and 2007. In 2005, he received an honorary doctorate from Tufts University. Now, as mayor of Hiroshima, Mayor Akiba serves as the president of Mayors for Peace, a dynamic and rapidly growing international network working for the global elimination of nuclear weapons by 2020. In fact, as of today, Mayors for Peace has reached 3,880 member cities in 143 countries and regions, and with your help, and let me tell you the significance of that, because in 2003, when Mayors for Peace launched its 2020 Vision campaign, there were only 500 members. So this is fast. But we're not done yet. And with your help, Mayors for Peace will reach 5,000 members very soon. At that time, Mayors for Peace will legitimately represent over 1 billion people on this planet. So on August 6th in 2008, this is what Secretary General Ban Ki-moon said about Mayors for Peace. I wish to acknowledge the leadership of the distinguished mayors of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, whose efforts through Mayors for Peace have gained recognition and respect throughout the world. Given the announcement by the UN Population Fund that the world's population is now predominantly urban, for the first time ever, mayors everywhere have a natural interest in ensuring that nuclear weapons are never used again. They understand that there is no more reliable way to achieve this than through the elimination of such weapons. And I give you Mayor Akiba.
I congratulate you on having the courage to confront the greatest form of violence ever known and the willingness to dig deeply to discover the causes and connections that will unlock the door to the future without nuclear weapons and full of happiness for all. I am here tonight because a sea change is taking place in the realm of nuclear disarmament, and because I am part of that big change as Mayor of Hiroshima and President of Mayors for Peace. Mayors live among our citizens. We typically try to create and often succeed in creating trusting relationships between our citizens and the City Hall based on facts and mutual respect. For example, when they come to us with a problem, such as uncollected garbage, we have to deal with it right away. And we have to recognize the fact. And we have to get results as well. We are also duty-bound to represent our citizens, to speak for them when they need to be heard, nationally and internationally. Being a mayor of a great city has many privileges. Perhaps the most important one is that it is a fantastic learning experience, which happens every day. Having taught many students in universities, I knew that teaching really means learning. But being a mayor is a bigger learning experience. And I wish all of you could be a mayor of either Hiroshima or Nagasaki for a few days. But fortunately for Hiroshima and Nagasaki and for all of you, there is a much better, easier, and efficient way to learn the same lessons that Mayor Taue and I had to learn the hard way. Please visit one or both of the cities. If you have done so already, please add one more trip. The citizens of both cities will welcome you more enthusiastically than anywhere else in the world. Guarantee honestly that your trip will convince you that we must act together now to abolish all nuclear weapons from the surface of our Earth. In other words, you'll have gained a keener sense of urgency about the life or death of this precious planet and human lives on it. The sense of urgency is one thing I truly would like to emphasize, because that is one ingredient that's lacking in the international arena at this point. Let me tell you about an encouraging and invigorating outcome I had the privilege of observing firsthand recently. Just 2 weeks ago, the Interaction Council annual meeting was held in Hiroshima. It is also known as the OB, that stands for Old Boys, Summit. There were no members of states who were women at the time. OB Summit because its members are former presidents, prime ministers, and other senior statesmen, and actually women. The Council has adopted the Hiroshima Declaration and issued a more specific and detailed communique in which they emphasize the points I'm trying to make tonight. To paraphrase their discoveries in my somewhat biased way, their trips to Hiroshima went far beyond their expectations. As heads of states in charge of the future of not only their own countries but of the entire world, and as an intelligent humanitarian statesman, they certainly did their homework. They did understand what actually had happened in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. But they actually pulled up to a higher dimension by going through the museums and listening to the testimonies of the hibakusha and viewing more than 10 million paper cranes. In other words, the senior statesmen understood that the hibakusha have known hell on earth, had glimpsed the end of the world, and most, if not all of them, have devoted themselves for decades to keep the rest of the world from ending that way. The hibakusha's message is very simple. No one else should ever suffer as we did. One important point in these words is that the expression no one includes literally everyone, including those you would normally label as enemies. Thus, it is a message of reconciliation and not retaliation. And I had difficulty trying to describe, what these senior statesmen actually felt in Hiroshima until I found a good sermon by Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King in his address called "Remaining Awake Through a Great Revolution," delivered in 1968. Let me quote, "It is no longer a choice, my friends, between violence and nonviolence. It is either nonviolence or non-existence, and the alternative to disarmament, the alternative to a greater suspension of nuclear tests, the alternative to strengthening the United Nations and thereby disarming the whole world may well be a civilization plunged into the abyss of annihilation. And our earthly habitat would be transformed into an inferno that even the mind of Dante could not imagine." And if that is what a visit to Hiroshima does, I would like to encourage all of you to visit Hiroshima with your own eyes and listen to the hibakusha with your own ears. And I would like to especially emphasize, together with these senior statesmen's recommendation, that the leaders of the world, especially the heads of the nuclear weapon states, visit Hiroshima and Nagasaki this year. And Hiroshima and Nagasaki are not the only cities, as I mentioned earlier. Citizens of the world have been crying all these years that violence and war must be stopped. And all of us here are these voices. We must speak louder to our national leaders that they visit Hiroshima and or Nagasaki or listen to the voices of the overwhelming majority of the people whom they are elected to serve. Nuclear weapons were designed to do just one thing: destroy cities. This is a key lesson of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and it is not lost on most mayors. The abstract concept of nuclear deterrence boils down to one simple point for cities. We are the hostages, thus potential victims. This is why Mayors for Peace is the fastest growing municipal association in the world. As Jackie mentioned, 6.5 years ago, November 2003, we declared our intention to free the world of nuclear weapons by the year 2020. When we launched the 2020 Vision campaign, we had just over 500 members. Today, we have nearly 4,000, well, 3,880 to be exact, members in 143 countries and regions. And as Jackie mentioned, with their help, we will reach 5,000 within this year. But our membership includes the largest, half of 100 largest cities in the world and nearly half of the world's capitals. And with these cities, we are now saying abolition now. Now means that multilateral negotiations to abolish nuclear weapons must start now. Not tomorrow, but today. And abolition means that it is accomplished by 2020, not in 2 or 3 generations, or not sometime in the future, but within a finite time, within 10 years' time, or 15 years' time, or 20 years' time, but finite. That's the important point about nuclear disarmament and abolition. I believe it is my duty to remind ourselves of why we must do our best, or even better than our best, to accomplish this goal. The reason I'd like to give you is that we as individuals and as one generation must pay our debt to 2 very important groups of people. One is the group of older generations, including those who are with us today, who are trying to accomplish our common goal. The other is the future generations to come. Please allow me to explain our debt to the former through my personal friendship with my mentor called Akira Ishida, who was a Hibakusha leader, teacher, poet, and a wonderful human being. On that fateful August 6, 1945, he was a 17-year-old draftee on leave in Hiroshima when he saw the flash of the A-bomb while riding in a streetcar. He died in 2003 after suffering for decades with many disorders caused by radiation. I was the last person outside of his family that talked with him before his death. He told me to make further efforts to abolish nuclear weapons for the sake of future generations. He added that he was very sorry that the abolition had not become reality in his lifetime. But it must be done while there are Hibakusha still alive. That was the point he wanted to make. He added that the 2020 Vision campaign that Mayors for Peace had decided to launch only 2 weeks before his death is a very good idea, and he sincerely wished that the human beings he trusted would accomplish that promise. Personally, I feel obligated to deliver his death wish. As other Hibakusha later told me the same concern, I believe it is the collective wish of all the Hibakusha who are keenly aware that their days are numbered to have nuclear weapons eliminated from the surface of this earth by 2020. Is it too much to make the wish of these Hibakusha a reality? Don't we owe that much to them who had suffered so much to show us through their sacrifices that nuclear weapons are the absolute evil? One last remark I'd like to make is that Hiroshima is conducting a feasibility study to whether we should bid or not for the 2020 Olympic Games to coincide with the dawn of a new nuclear weapon-free world. Although it was not our intention in the beginning, we have found out that talking about the Hiroshima Olympic Games in 2020 has drawn many people into our side. And some of those were never interested in this subject at all. However, many have felt comfortable to talk about the abolition of nuclear weapons by 2020 after declaring that they support the 2020 Hiroshima Olympic Games. This is something new, but it is something that we have found very interesting and encouraging. And the circle of the supporters of Mayors of Peace, as a result, is widening. Just mention the Olympic Games, and you'll get a friend who will work with you for the abolition of nuclear weapons by 2020. As a result, the tide of the world is flowing in the right direction. It's partly because your effort and also the leaders' efforts. We know it, and we know that we can make it greater because we are part of it and because we are the majority. We understand the legacy of our hibakusha and our obligations to future generations. That is why we want to reaffirm now that we have the responsibility. Through our work the world over, we have shown that we have the power to change our future. Together with Secretary General Ban, President Obama, Prime Minister Hatoyama, and all other leaders of the world who are with us, we can make our dreams a reality. We can create a world without nuclear weapons and hold the Olympic Games to celebrate that occasion.
We shall be peace. We shall be peace.